What's up, everybody? This is Logan Schultz with Estate Professionals, your Colorado Front Range Realtors. I'm going to do another video today on earnest money and how it relates to the dates and deadlines in the contract. So, my hope is to go through items 1 through 8, explain what these deadlines pertain to and how they relate to your earnest money. Once I've made a few videos and have gone through all the different dates and deadlines in the contract, I will put together a video on how you can write or how you should structure the dates and deadlines if you're writing your own contract. All right, so let's get started. Item number 2 here is alternative earnest money deadline. So in Colorado, typically a buyer is going to bring earnest money when they go under contract. And earnest money is a deposit that you put down to show that you're moving forward with the purchase in good faith. Typically, it's going to be between 1 to 5% of the purchase price. So if you're buying a $500,000 home, $5,000 to $10,000 is most common. Sometimes you might see it higher, sometimes lower, but this is pretty common. It is possible for the buyer to lose their earnest money, but primarily if they go through all of these dates and deadlines and don't cancel the contract in a timely manner. So, in other words, if you go through all of your dates and deadlines on the contract and maybe you show up to closing and get cold feet and decide you're not going to close on the home, you're probably going to lose your earnest money or your deposit, right? If you lose the money, that money is going to go to the seller most often, and sometimes it might be divided between the seller and the listing agent. So that's what the earnest money is. So the first deadline here is this item number 1, time of day deadline. By default, the contract assumes that the time of day deadline is going to be 11:59 p.m. or midnight for all of the dates and deadlines that we put in the contract. So what that means is if you have a deadline of the 5th to do something, then if I've left this blank, the time of day deadline, then you have till 11:59 p.m. to do it at the latest, right? If I put something else in there like 7 p.m. or 8 p.m., then I have until 7 or 8 p.m. to do that. So when I'm on the listing side, I kind of like to have those dates and deadlines earlier so that my seller isn't waiting around till midnight to find out if we're going to be moving forward or not beyond a certain deadline. If I'm on the buy side, I obviously like to have a little bit more time, but 8 p.m., typically gives me plenty of time because you're not doing much negotiating or talking to anybody after 8 p.m. So, all right. So the first section of kind of rights that the buyer has, sort of to cancel the contract or to make sure that they feel good about what they're buying. That's going to be these title deadlines, items number 3 through 8. So the first item is this record title deadline and tax certificate deadline. What this means for a buyer is that when you have sent an offer to a seller and the seller has signed and accepted your offer, they are going to take this offer and send it to the title company, to the title officer that you're working with. And the title company is usually going to put together what's called a title commitment. And this is a document that says, we will give the buyer title insurance on the home under a certain set of conditions. So those are called the conditions in the title commitment. And they're simple things typically like we'll get paid, that we get a tax certificate. And there can be some more complicated ones, but typically they're pretty simple. And then you're going to have in that same title commitment another section that says, these are the things that we will not insure over, right? Those are called the exceptions. So typically title insurance is looking in the past. And those are things that they know exist, that they affect the property today, and so the title insurance company is not going to cover them. A good example could be covenants, right? So you buy a home in a neighborhood, the neighborhood has covenants. Those are a set of rules that are bound to the land. Typically those covenants are required by the city in order for the builder to have gotten approval to even build the neighborhood to begin with. But these covenants will restrict everybody in some way, even if there's no HOA. So it's important for the buyers to read through the title commitment, read through the exceptions, and then there will typically be links to these original documents. And it's important for them to read through those original documents too, to make sure that you truly feel comfortable with the home that you're buying. The other thing that you want to look at that you'll get with this title commitment is a tax certificate. And a tax certificate is going to basically tell you what your taxes are. But it's important because sometimes you're buying a home from maybe a 70-year-old woman that's lived in the home by herself for the last 12 years. Well, if she has a senior exemption tax, when you look at your payment, if it's based off of those senior exemption taxes, you're going to be a little upset when you get a letter from the county assessor saying that your senior exemption tax has been revoked because you're not old enough or haven't lived in the property long enough in order to be able to claim the same senior exemption tax that the previous owner was claiming, right? So it could also be for Gold Star families, partially or fully disabled veterans sometimes have lower property tax rates. So it's important to read through that to make sure you know what your taxes are. The other thing is sometimes sellers and listing agents don't know that the home is in a metro district, or they might just not know what a metro district is. And that obviously has a severe impact on the property taxes that you're paying. In some cases, they might be more than double. And it could affect your resale of the property later too. So you want to check the tax certificate and see if you're in a metro district, even if everybody says you're not. The tax certificate's like 1 to 2 pages. It's worth your time to do that. All right, so that's our deadline by which we have to receive that title commitment, and you can see that there's some stuff for us to review in there, usually quite a bit of reading. So after we've received that, we have a deadline by which we have to tell the seller that if there's anything that we found to be wrong with the title commitment, any cause that we have of believing that the type of ownership we're going to have in the home is going to be hindered in a way that we can't live with. If that's the case, we would need to object before this record title objection deadline item number 4, right? If we've objected to something, then we have a deadline by which we have to put together a resolution with the seller. If we can't come up with a resolution, the contract is going to die automatically. So in this case, we're just going to skip 2 of these, and it's going to go to this title resolution deadline item number 7. I want to give yourself at least a couple days for this. The reality is these title issues are going to be difficult for the seller to come up to have any solution to them in some cases, but when there is a solution, it's not going to be overnight, so you might even need to extend this deadline a little bit. All right, so those are the title commitment items. And then we have this off-record title deadlines. These off-record title deadlines are 2 things are happening here. One, the seller is going to disclose to you anything that would affect title, but wouldn't come up on a public record search. So maybe they had given an easement for their neighbor to use their driveway in the winter months because this lady is a snowbird, so in the wintertime she goes to Arizona and she lets her neighbor use her driveway. And just because she's a formal person, she went through and made an official easement and gave a copy to her neighbor. But nobody ever went and recorded it as a document of public record. All right, this is something that she would need to disclose by this off-record title deadline. It's also a good opportunity for the buyers to look into anything that might be affecting the neighborhood. So like road expansion projects, crime statistics, sex offenders living in the area, school rankings, that type of stuff. Stuff that's not going to appear on title but would affect you. You could also do some of those things during your inspection period, but this is the part where it makes the most sense to do that. So then it's the same structure as before. If we found a problem with it and there's something that we think the seller can do about it, then we have a deadline by which we would need to object. And then there's a title resolution deadline again. It's going to be the same title resolution that we used previously, so that's item number 7, in order for us to see if we can come up with a resolution with the seller. Same thing, if we can't come up with a resolution, the contract's going to die at midnight or whatever date we set up here in our time of day deadline, and both parties will move on their separate ways. And then finally, this is something that we're not going to use very often, but this third party right to purchase or approve deadline, it is basically what it sounds like. If you have somebody that has given somebody else the first right of refusal on your home. So maybe the landlord tells their tenant, hey, if I ever list this for sale, I'll give you the first right of refusal, but you got to tell me within the first 10 days of when I list it for sale. Otherwise, I've got the right to sell to whoever I want to sell it to. Then you would put that in there because somebody else is going to have the first option to buy that home before you as a buyer does, right? Usually you would rely on the seller to provide this information to you. If the seller doesn't provide the information, like maybe it's an estate, from time to time, if somebody has a option to purchase the property, they might have recorded it as I think as a lien, or just might be in the public records, so it could come up on a title commitment. But it's pretty rare that people give somebody else this right to purchase deadline. So most of the time we're going to put NA here. Just ask the seller, is there anybody else that is there a third party that has a right to purchase, or is there somebody else that has to approve this contract before you sell it? That would be for the approval deadline, right? So that's kind of the first sections, items 1 through 8 right there. In the next video, I'll kind of just keep going through these different deadlines, what they mean and how to use them. And then again, at the very end, I'll go through and make another video about how you tie all of these dates and deadlines together. I hope this has been useful to you. If you have any questions about Colorado real estate or real estate anywhere in the country, let me know. I'm always happy to answer your questions. And thanks for your time. I appreciate it, and we'll talk to you soon.